Welcome to the Finding Purpose LiveCast, where we feature authors, leaders, and speakers of purpose on a live platform to have truly authentic conversations. And now your host, Davin Salvagno.
Hey, Todd, how are you?
Doing great. How are you, Davin?
I am outstanding. I am so excited to have you on our live cast today. And man, I know that the people listening to this are truly going to be blessed by your wisdom and your insight. So thank you so much for being on today.
Glad to be here. Super excited. Thank you for having me. I'm glad we met up at the airport that time.
I know, right? So what an amazing story. So we're here with Todd Stewart, who's the president of Gulf Winds International. Todd and I met at a C12 biannual meeting that they have called Current 19 last year. I was waiting for an Uber, and Todd was the keynote speaker at the event and came up and said, "You're waiting for an Uber?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "You want to ride to the airport?" And I said, "Sure." And we got in the car and had a great half-hour impactful conversation. And here we are almost a year later to the date, pretty much. And now we have an opportunity to share your story. It's just amazing how that all came together.
Absolutely. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Davin.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure, brother. So as I mentioned, you're the president of Gulf Winds International. A lot of people don't know what Gulf Winds International is. So give us a little bit of a background of Gulf Winds, what you guys do, your role there, and then kind of your story, the journey leading up to what today is Gulf Winds and you leading that organization.
Yeah, sounds good. So I hope to just encourage some folks today, obviously. And our company was started by my father. My dad was in the military. Here we are coming right off of Memorial Day. So he served in the Navy during Vietnam, went right to work in the shipping industry after that, and really stayed there for almost all of his career. In his early 50s, two large companies merged. He had been overseas as managing director for the UK for a specific company. Moved back, transferred back to Atlanta. I was in college at the time, got laid off in his early 50s. First time he'd ever lost his job in his entire career. So basically they had climbed the mountain. They had even been overseas, kind of lived the dream, so to speak, and woke up without a job in his early 50s trying to figure out what's next. And of course, me being in college at the time, my first thought was I need to take care of business here. And then obviously my dad invited me to join what would become Gulf Winds International. And, grew up very much middle-class family. When I look back, it's pretty amazing. I was taking my daughter up through kind of just, when you have an opportunity to take your kids back to where your great-grandparents live. And I recognized that my great-grandfather was actually a driver of a logging truck up in East Texas. And so here we are, and I own a trucking company. So we move international freight. It's containers that come in on ocean vessels. We handle imports and exports primarily. And we also have large warehouse facilities located adjacent to the Port of Houston. So we have operations in Houston, Dallas, and over the last couple of years, we opened up terminals in Mobile and also in Memphis. So we operate about 450 trucks. So we move a lot of international freight in the market off the railroads and out of the ports. And our company really grew from one customer in one location with that crazy story of my dad being laid off, and really with just the idea that we had one customer, and it was a coffee customer who was importing green coffee in 150-pound sacks. So I was cheap labor, literally right out of college, driving a forklift, hand unloading cargo. We would stack it. When they'd get ready to roast the coffee, we would ship it to them. So God has really blessed the organization. We've had an opportunity to grow and really become a leader in what we do. So we're a large drayage provider. I call it. That word drayage is foreign to some, but basically it means we haul ocean containers.
Wow. That's amazing. And you think because you said he was in his 50s, early 50s when this happened, right? There's actually it's on the shelf behind me. There's a book called Halftime that talks about two sides of life, the search for success and then the search for significance. And it was like, man, your dad was really starting his life of significance, really, if you think about it, in his 50s. What an encouraging story for so many people who think life might be winding down. He was just ramping up and getting started. And look at the impact that has had today. You said 400 some trucks, You have
Yeah.
facilities in Dallas, Houston, Mobile, I'm assuming that's Alabama, and Memphis, Tennessee.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think I saw on your, I don't know if it was on a LinkedIn or on a YouTube, a video, GoFund's video, but something like 1 million plus of warehouse square footage along those ports. Is that right?
We do. Yeah. One of the things that really put us on the map, Davin, was at the time, a lot of people obviously have ceramic tile in their house. So we were trying to figure out, how do we grow this business? And long story short, there was a problem that needed to be solved. And people were running cargo illegally from Houston to Dallas. It was overweight and it was heavy ceramic tile. Obviously, tile is very heavy. We managed to get connected to a person that knew somebody in the trucking business who was actually had lightweight aluminum vans, and they were hauling beer one way from Dallas to Houston, and they had nothing going back. And so we basically managed to use a law in Texas that allowed us to haul 10% over legal axle and 5% over legal gross to get those containers from the port to our warehouse facility. And then we actually utilized those trucks to haul that freight to Dallas. And there were thousands of loads that were moving, and they were moving illegally at the time. So it was an easy sell that God kind of put in our lap that basically really transformed things. And we call that transloading. It's basically unloading cargo, putting it on a domestic truck, and then delivering it to where it needs to go. And so instead of taking a truck from Houston to Dallas and bringing it back, you basically transload it at the port, put it on a truck one way to Dallas. And so then you don't have that empty drive. So we did it for less money, solved an issue for the customer. And so that's a winner, obviously, for everybody. And that really put us on the map. And we started to really grow and expand, and really all different kinds of commodities started to run through our facilities. But yeah, that was kind of the business side of things for us. But obviously, there was a faith side going on there as well, which was really for me transformational. I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't grow up, with the idea that we would have a nonprofit that we actually operate today. And so it's been really exciting to watch how God has allowed us to use the company to do some amazing things as well. So hopefully we'll get to talk a little bit more about that too.
Absolutely. That's what you just shared there is so insightful and such a great example of really what it means to find purpose. This is the Finding Purpose LiveCast, but to find purpose in your work, right? You guys, obviously, you have this logistic company, and you found a need and you met it. Everyone seems to think that, purpose is how do I get paid to do what I love to do? And that's not really, those are elements, but really the starting point of purpose is, what is it that we are good at that others need right now? What are the gifts, talents, and abilities and resources that God has given us? And where can we meet the needs of those around us with what we've been given? And what you guys found in doing that was you solved the problem for customers that wasn't prior being solved. And then you were faithful in what was given to you. And then you were blessed because of that, right? And so, like you said, other things spun off of that because your focus was on how are we utilizing these things, the things that we're good at, these resources, for a purpose that meets a need that someone else has. And that's really the foundations of your incredible growth that you've had.
Yeah, it really is. And, when I look back and I think about it, really blows my mind, honestly, to think about it, because I really had no intention on, like I said, the idea of leading a foundation and being able to do the things that we've been able to do through the company. That was never really on my mind. I was just thinking, how do we make a living? How do we, show up every day? I remember sweeping the floor thinking, this is going to be worth it one day in these big warehouse facilities. And, you just really, I was president in training from day one. And so a couple years into the business, though, I was a couple years into marriage, just trying to figure out marriage. And it was a lot harder than what I had anticipated, and got invited actually to church by a friend of mine who I played football with in high school. And the Lord really got a hold of my heart at that point. And honestly, that became a real challenge for me going into the business as well, because honestly, I thought for a season that my calling, so to speak, was going to be to preach. And my life had been so transformed when I was forgiven by the Lord. And I looked back at my life and I thought, wow, I wasn't looking for him, and he found me right where I'm at. And so it was really an awesome personal experience that I had, that actually spilled over to my dad, who was in his 50s at the time, who saw a big difference in me, just how I was going about my business, wanting to serve and love others well. And a few years later, he gave his life to the Lord as well. So we both kind of found our purpose through the starting of a crazy, logistics business that we never really figured that we would be in. And, unfortunately, my dad passed away about 3 years ago of leukemia, but we had the joy of getting to serve and have a purpose together in business as well. So for me, there was a crossroads, because I literally remember being in tears thinking, okay, Lord, here I am, president in training. I'm an only child. My dad's been laid off in his early 50s. So I kind of felt the pressure of, this responsibility of this business being on me to fulfill kind of the family legacy. At the same time, I kind of felt the Lord saying, Todd, I really want to use you in different ways to help people. And finally, one day, what really got me, Davin, was just, I guess, one of the things that we talked about was, when did you feel like you found purpose in your life? And so for me, it was really early on after I'd come to faith, and I was having a conversation with a lady who was having some significant challenges in her life. And we were just chatting in my office, and, we have a busy operation. There's a lot of things going different directions. But on this particular day, she was just sitting and sharing with me some of the hurts and the challenges that she was going through. And I remember for the first time in my life realizing, like, God can use me to share his love with her right now. And so all I did was basically tell her my story, my dad's story, kind of how we weren't really looking to, we weren't looking for Christ, so to speak, but he found us, and just how that brought ultimate peace and joy to my life. And it gave me purpose. And little did I know, because she had asked me about my faith, that she would give her life to the Lord at that time as well. And so there was a trigger in me at that moment that made me realize that, and it's biblical, that God has called us, equipped us, and saved us so that we can share his love with those around us. And so it was really at that moment that I kind of broke free from that feeling of that weightiness of, Todd, are you going to go preach, or are you going to serve your dad and your mom and this company and their employees? And I realized that God had given me a great opportunity to serve people, most of whom had a lot of challenges right in front of me every day when I go to work. And so in essence, I was able to do what pastors desire to do every day, because frankly, a lot of the people that you work with, they may not even have a faith walk. Some do, but many don't. And so I may be the only Jesus that they see that day. And so my hope was just from that moment on, I just got passionate about, man, we want to have a great business, but we want to do it for the right reasons. And so that's kind of what I really dedicated my life to. And ultimately, God has been so faithful to continue to allow us to, our mission is to glorify God by providing world-class logistics services through continual investment in our people, our clients, our community, and the world we live in. And so that's kind of my funnel for everything is, hey, we want to glorify God in all that we do. But by the way, we want to be the best at what we do in all the markets that we serve. And he's just given me an awesome team. And I've watched God do incredible things in the lives of people for the last 25 years. And so it's really been an amazing journey that, like I said, I always say that, God, he equips the call, right? Sometimes I was reading in Proverbs this morning, and this idea of wisdom, like we all want wisdom. And the older I get, it's like the more I realize what I don't know. And it's almost like this huge humility that the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. And so I'd like to say that, I put this whole plan together. And a few years back, it was kind of funny because we went through a private equity deal when we had another partner. It's a long story, but basically the private equity guys came in. I was kind of the sales guy for that deal. And we wound up not selling the business, but we went through the process. And I just remember these guys constantly being like, what's the secret? What's the secret? And the hard part is they don't understand that for me, my secret is the Lord. My secret is the faith that I have in Jesus Christ and what that's done for me. And I just believe in his provision, his protection, his power. And I've witnessed his provision, even during COVID, just seeing how God has provided for our company through ups and downs. And I'm not one of these prosperity guys that goes, hey, give your life to the Lord and everything's going to be great. Because the reality is I've probably been through as much as anybody over the last 7 years. I've lost my dad. I've lost both grandmothers. I've been sued. We've been through floods. We've been through just anything just about that you can think of. And now COVID, obviously. So went through a difficult buyout with a partner that we had for many years. Right after we closed the buyout, which nobody said could happen because we were 50-50 partners, the market fell off in oil and gas. So in Houston, that's a big deal. And so we know what it's like to struggle. But at the same time, we know the joy in the struggle as we walk that path. And so that for me has been just amazing to watch. And it's not always been easy. Like I said, I've definitely had times of tears and struggle. Anybody that's in leadership will go through that. And it's funny, I emailed my pastor this morning, and he's dealing with COVID and those kind of things as well. And he was like, man, this was supposed to be a great year of growth and this, that, and the other. And I was thinking the same thing. 2020 was going to be the best year on record for our company. And I even basically announced that this is going to be the most generous year on record. What I didn't realize was often it's the giving out of our poverty that is the most powerful. And so we need to be faithful in good times and faithful in bad times. And that's kind of what God's taught me over the last 25 years, going through a lot of different things.
That is so good, and such a great reminder for so many who are going through adversity right now. And one of the things that you were talking about when you said that God equips the called, Roger Norberg, who's our C12 chair up here in Michigan, he has a voicemail, and he, when you call him, he says, I can't come to the phone right now, but he always ends his voicemail with, and remember, God will give you everything you need to do all that he's calling you to do. And yes. There have been times where sometimes I've called Roger hoping he doesn't answer just so I can hear those words. And we joke about that, but that's exactly right. And I think because, like you said, it's not this, it's not this prosperity gospel. It's not this, concept of, hey, the secret is Jesus. That's why we're successful. And I think you said something earlier where you talked about how you had this struggle between, do I be a pastor or do I lead this company that my dad started? Which way, how do I do right? And it really ended up kind of being and really the greatest expression of love that we can give to others is in serving others. And leadership, when done well, all leadership should be servant leadership. Realistically, I don't even know. I'm a big fan of servant leadership, a huge fan of that concept. But really, all leadership in its purest form is servant leadership. And what better way to lead others than to serve them? And what better way to serve them than to love them? And what better way to preach and show the gospel and the truth than loving others and serving others? And so you were able to do both by leading an organization, by serving your people, by loving them, right? And we've been told, right, preach the gospel at all times, if necessary, use words, right? And you guys are really living that out. And that is actually the secret. I mean, we all know there's that book, The Secret, that came out. We're not talking about that. The best kept secrets sometimes shouldn't be. And really your secret is this concept of that you are leading from a position of purpose, you're leading with purpose, but then it's also your people, right? There's something about Gulf Winds. I remember being we were at Current last year, and you were sitting at the table right in front of us. And I think you were in the chair in front of me. I was sitting behind you, but your entire team, you had two tables, and both tables, you were all wearing your Gulf Winds polos or shirts. And they were a rowdy, contagious bunch. Talk to me in a great way. Talk to me a little bit about how you fostered that, right? I know what's inside you, and I know what is why Gulf Winds has been successful with you as a president, you at the helm, and putting first things first. But tell me a little bit about your people and how that culture has kind of become as rowdy and contagious as it has.
Yeah, well, first of all, what I love about how God works is he puts the right people around you at the right times. And honestly, and I would say that you just can't do it on your own. No matter what you're doing, you got to have people that come along with you. And I feel like as a leader, the best thing that you can do is, in order to love somebody, right, you want to bring them on the journey with you. And if I'm going on a mission trip, then I want to take people with me. And we've done that in the company. And it's amazing how, God reaches people when you bring them along with you. And so, I can't always change a heart. I can't always, I can't equip everybody, but what I can do is put them in a position to learn, and I can put them in a position to hear from the Lord. And if he touches their heart, or if they pick up something that enables them to achieve some of their goals in life, then we've lifted them. We've allowed them to rise to what I believe God wants to do with all of us, right? And that is maximize our gifts. And so it's been a journey. I mean, for me, I think one of the hardest things any leader does is put together an executive team. It's put together a leadership team. And so I definitely bumped my head along that path and that journey. But God has allowed me now to have a team that is very much aligned. And I'd like to tell you that process happened just immediately. But generally, anything worthwhile in life takes time. And I just feel like investing in people takes years. It takes time. And when people know you love them and you care about them, number one, I think if there's one thing that I would say that my team always would probably tell you, and that is that, first of all, I keep the main thing all the time. And for me, my main thing is I want to love people well. Obviously, I want to honor our mission, which is to glorify God in the business. And we got to do a great job. And so it's really pretty simple when you think about it, but not everybody's on the same page at the same time. And so what I watched is really I've got three key people on our executive team, and I watched how over the last many years God has literally molded and worked on each of those individuals differently. All three of them have different gifts. And so early on in my leadership, I remember that my tendency was to want to put people in positions that were like me, right? Like you tend to hire and want to be around and want to work with people who are like you. But what God has taught me over that time is that we really all need people who are different than us around us, because that's how a team is strengthened, whether it's a church, an organization, or whatever. And so, God is growing me up in the same way. I don't have all the answers. I read in Proverbs this morning, just the value of wisdom. And so we're all seeking wisdom. And for me, that's where I find it is in the scriptures. And the Lord provides me with wisdom to make decisions. But as far as that team goes, like I said, I'd like to take credit for that. But the reality is I just feel like God brought each of those people to us at the right time for the right purpose and the right reason. Our CFO, as an example, he was a guy who was actually helping us during the buyout process. And he'd been introduced to us through a C12 contact. And I realized we were going to need a CFO when that process was over. And so, he lived in Tampa at the time. He had no intentions on being in Houston. And, he saw that I had the same values and faith that he had, and he aligned with the organization. And so he decided to come on board. We got him to move his family from Tampa to Houston. So, our COO, he's been with us for 20 plus years. And I think he's one of the first people that I ever shared my faith with. God's worked on him for years and years and years. And he brings a tremendous value to the organization operationally. He's gifted totally different than I am. And I've just watched how God has used his gifts to really benefit the organization. He's a problem solver. And then I have, Patrick, who is our executive vice president. He kind of manages the sales side of what we do. And Patrick's kind of the peacemaker. He's kind of the steady hand that kind of just keeps everybody moving. And so we all have different gifts. And, for me, I like to inspire people and love them well and those kind of things. But I think what we have to remember is that we all need a group, right? Even Jesus needed a group. He picked 12. And so we all need people around us with different gifts and talents. And that's really how we advance an organization. Ultimately, nobody does it on their own. Nobody wakes up and takes credit. You just can't even write the story. I mean, come on, my dad was laid off in his early 50s. we were not wealthy by any stretch. We were very much a middle-class family. Yes, he had worked his way up in an organization, but the reality is, I mean, we had not one bank that would give us any kind of money. So he took his 401k money at 50 plus, cashed it in, and we were literally 1 month from going broke.
Wow.
So you can't write this kind of stuff up. And then today, right, to be operating, at the level that we are, the size we are, it's only God can do those things. And I'd like to say that we were smart and all that, but just like I told the private equity guys, when they wanted a recipe, they wanted me to tell them we did X, Y, Z, and all I could tell them is, God's been so faithful to us, and he's brought the right people along in the process. And through that, we've been able to impact a lot of lives here and around the globe. And so that's my goal, just to continue to impact lives and continue to love people well. And that doesn't mean that you don't have to make hard decisions either, though. You still have to run an excellent business. And I think this idea that people and profits have to be separate is something that we're always wrestling with, right? Because really they need to go together, because God wants us to be a great steward of what he's provided to us. At the same time, he wants us to love people well. And those things can be intermingled. They can be mixed. They don't have to work against each other. I mean, God desires us to steward not only our resources, but our people well. And that requires putting the right people in the right roles, and ultimately, solving problems and obviously trying to provide great solutions for your customers. So that's what we're after. And in the process, we hope that we get to put people in a position maybe to hear from the Lord and maybe to experience the same kind of life change that I have over the last 20 plus years. And that to me is just priceless.
That's so good. What you just shared there in terms of where do people and profits in this wrestling thing, it's long been said, there's been this where there's been books, people over profits and people over process. And, there's these P's that I've talked about for years: purpose, people, process, performance, profits. And you just articulated that so well, because in the end of the day, we're all called towards a purpose, right? Greater than any of us. And our companies have a purpose greater than any individual one of us. And if we're faithful in those things and we invite people to join us in that purpose, or God brings us the people to join us in that purpose, and we ultimately put the processes in place and use the profits to support them in achieving that purpose, it becomes a constant growth upcycle, right? Where we're leading with this concept of purpose first, right? Our people achieving that purpose, using processes to support the people, using profits to support the processes that support the people to achieve the purpose. There's this natural forward progression. And as long as we continue to grow our people, we continue to grow our organization and steward our people and utilize the profits to do that. So I think you're absolutely right. They don't go against each other. It's not one or the other. It's how do we steward our profits and steward our people, and how do we steward the profits to support our people to ultimately achieve the purpose that we are called towards. And Gulf Winds is doing a tremendous job. I mean, this is what good looks like. Gulf Winds is what good looks like when it comes from leading with purpose, leading from purpose, and inviting your people to be on that journey with you.
Yeah, amen. I would amen that. And it's look, it's a great joy and honor and blessing to be able to steward any business. And so, I never saw myself in this role, to be honest with you. God has put me in a role where, again, it's really the bigger you get as an organization, the better your team is as a whole. It's even strange at times, because what's really awesome for me now is to look and to see, having served in almost every area of the organization over a number of years, looking and seeing that they're making it better than I could. And that's just something that should bring great joy when you have. So it's like looking at a child, right, and seeing that they're achieving, they're doing things that maybe you could or didn't do, and so you take great pride and joy in the fact that the team is performing and doing great things. And I'm a big believer that organizations have an opportunity to change the world by investing in communities, and we invest in local nonprofits and international nonprofits that are doing amazing work here and around the world. And I just believe that if businesses with purpose a portion of their profits to have community impact, that we could literally transform the world. And so I would just encourage those that may be watching or listening that business doesn't have to be just inwardly focused, right? It's technically designed to be an organism that can also serve the community and serve the world well. And I know that's, cliche, so to speak. And I know there's companies that do it just so they can get the check on the box and they can have the commercial or the social media impact. But I mean, if you really do it from a heart's perspective, there's just no greater joy. And I think what's really cool about introducing your people to service and to giving is that we're the ones that are changed in that process. That's and right. Especially in hard times. And so as you take people along on that journey to serve and to give, they're being impacted. Like, we get more out of it than the people that we're serving. That's this right. idea that we're going to somehow come along and like solve everyone's problems, that's not what happens. What happens is God actually flips the tables on us and turns it around and is like, I'm teaching you in this moment on what it's like to serve, to love, to lead, to come alongside, just like I did whenever I came alongside and saved you. And so God is faithful, and he is working powerfully in the business community. I love C12. It's expanding all over the country and all over the world. And I just think, anybody that's running a business and has an opportunity to be a part of that, it would be great. But I just want to see more people engaged in serving people in the community and the world. And I think if we do that, then a lot of our challenges will certainly be lessened in the process.
That is exactly right. Oh, brother. I mean, your heart for community and for people is so evident, and you articulate that so well. As Patrick Lencioni says in his book, The Advantage, the purpose of every organization is to improve the quality of human life in some way. That external focus really should be our main focus. And the other thing is that, when we are given the opportunity to lead such organizations, our greatest opportunity is really not how big we build a business or the bottom line. Our greatest opportunity is, who do we help others become in the process? As a leader, that's the greatest thing. Who are we helping our people become? And then, as you mentioned, when we focus on that, what the ultimate reward is who we become in the process. Right. So
one thing I would say on that note is, everybody kind of idolizes growth. Everybody kind of idolizes. We just live in a society where that's the thing, right? And as I was even emailing this morning, our pastor, and thinking about COVID and this year and all of that, we need to learn to appreciate the grind. And we live in a society where everything is kind of right at your fingertips, and especially like the younger generation. I know this is brought up quite a bit, but like, you just don't like overnight succeed in everything. That's just not how life works. And by the way, it's not designed to work that way. God molds us over a lifetime. Success is a byproduct of that.
That's right.
But one of the opportunities that we have, and we will miss if we're not careful, is our growth happens in the hard seasons. When I took over as president in 2012, I had big ideas, big dreams, big goals, right? Little did I know what was coming and all that we would face in the next several years, including my dad's, diagnosis and death in that process. One of the awesome things, though, is to learn to enjoy and to take the good out of that grind and that hard journey, because that's really where we're being molded. And I think where you have success quickly, you see pride and you see ego and you see a lot of destruction. And so there is great benefit to enjoying that journey and asking, what can I learn along the way? And it's just like working out or anything else. Nothing that we do that's worth anything is easy. And when it is, we take it for granted, and we don't realize the joy or the fulfillment in that we could have. And so I think that would be just my other message, would just be, it's okay that you're not growing at this rate, or, whatever your dream is. But what is God teaching me today? And how can I apply that to myself and those around me? Because he's called us to love our neighbor, to love him and love our neighbor. And if we do that well every day, and we walk in obedience to him and we follow, there's such joy in that. And honestly, it's those hard times, that's where the most fruit is found. And so I've got this crazy dynamic going on right now because ministry wise, from a missional perspective, I'm just seeing incredible opportunities. All of our nonprofit partners, just incredible opportunities, what God is doing right now in the world because of the hardship we're facing. On the other side, I recognize fully the business challenges and the hardships that are there as well. And that's really hard when you operate in both of those realms because they really go together. And so my hope is that we can provide some hope to people who might be challenged or struggling to know that that we all struggle, we all have challenges. None of us are exempt. Just because I have president and CEO behind my name and we happen to have a good company that does a lot of good things, those that are closest to me know the challenges and the struggles that I've been through over the last 7 or 8 years. And, I wouldn't change it because it makes me who I am today. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And that's really my message is how can we grow right where we're planted? And sometimes we're always looking ahead, so we miss the opportunity to grow where we are. And what I'm seeing right now is that God is multiplying the seed, and there is such opportunity for growth if we'll settle in to where we are. But if we want to jump ahead, we'll miss that opportunity. So just trying to learn how to enjoy the moment and really, challenge myself to see what God is doing in my own heart. And then obviously, how can I share that with those around me and encourage them in the process?
Brother, so good. I can't even think of a better way to end this conversation than what you just said. That, in fact, I would encourage people who are listening to this right now to just rewind that last 5 minutes and digest exactly what you just said, because we all need to grow right where we're at, right where we're planted, make the impact where we're at, because this is a season of growth. If we
and one of the biblical principles, Davin, is God basically gives us as much as we'll apply. In other words, if I'm not going to apply what he's already showed me, then why should he give me anything else?
That's right.
And so what I need to do is take what I'm learning and apply it well. And that's whenever it seems like just there's more knowledge, there's more wisdom, there's more opportunity for growth. But many times the reason we're not growing is just like our children, is because they haven't done what we've asked them to do.
That's right. That's right.
And so I look in the mirror and I'm like, you're the child sometimes. Like you're the problem. It's not them. It's not the market. It's not this. It's like, if we would just be honest with ourselves, most of the time, we're the problem.
That's right.
And so we just got to trust God that he's got us there for a reason and be encouraged.
That's right. It's amazing how much we can learn as parents, for those of us who are parents, from our children and catch ourselves in the moment, because at the end, we're all still children. And such words of wisdom, regardless of whether you're leading a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar organization, or you're running a startup, or you're an employee on the front line somewhere. And the important thing is that we all continue to grow where we're at, where we're placed, and that we focus on serving the lives of those around us. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you for continuing to keep that in front of you as a leader, and not allowing the success that GolfWinds has had to change who you are, your perspective, and your heart for people, and to continuing to rise over adversity after adversity after adversity by continuing to focus on your purpose and your people and putting them first. Thank you for the impact and the difference that you and your team continue to make in your local community, but really around the world through what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Davin. I love what you're doing with this podcast, and it's an opportunity to encourage people. And I hope that we've done that today. We definitely want to do that. I know one thing I thought about while you were speaking there was, Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me," and the faith of a child is so telling. And it's this idea of how can I humble myself and recognize that I'm not in charge. When I do that, I open my hands. And it's just amazing what God will pour out whenever we do that. And so
That's right.
really just having a heart of humility and trusting that there's always a bigger goal. There's always a bigger plan. When I think about my dad, I think Romans 8:28, God works all things for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And so I hope that whoever's listening just knows that whatever you're going through, whatever challenge that you're facing, God wants to use that for his glory. He wants to molds you into the image of his son. And I've watched him do that in my own life. Doesn't mean it's fun, doesn't mean it's easy, but it's true. And over a lifetime, we wake up and we're a little bit more like him. And because of that, the world's a better place. So I'm excited about what God is doing in this season, even though it's challenging. And I think that we all have an opportunity to do more and to encourage others. And so really grateful for what you're doing and for this podcast.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. And that verse, Romans 8:28, is on a big fat head on my wall right in front of me. And it holds a very special place in my heart. And I love that imagery of holding our hands out. So often we want to grip on to, our plans for 2020, the things we want to accomplish, the things that we want to do. We want to jump ahead, but God can't fill our hands if they're not open and we don't let go.
Yeah.
And so thank you for opening your hands today and giving so much of your time. I know that this was only supposed to be 30 minutes, but this was so good and you were just on fire that I just wanted to keep on going. So thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, especially with all that you have going on, leading your organization through this crisis, continuing to help all of the ministries and nonprofits that you're serving, to take an hour out of your schedule to inspire those who are listening today. I know that God's going to use this for someone today who had the opportunity to hear your words. So thank you again, brother. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Davin. God bless you. And I appreciate everything that you're doing.
My pleasure. If you were listening today, we were listening to Todd Stewart, President and CEO of Gulf Winds International. You can check them out on their website. You can follow Todd and his organization on LinkedIn and on Facebook and all those places there. And I encourage you to take the wisdom that Todd gave you today and to apply it to your life, apply it to your organization, and to keep growing where you're planted and to never stop finding opportunities to serve and love those around you. Keep leading with purpose.